do it together. Peace.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to ReNew You. We are brought to you by the Community Christian Center, where we believe that life is better when we do it together. That is more true than you know. So, my name is Paul Fletcher. And we're going to go through, I'm actually excited about some of the information we're going to go through this morning. But before I get to that, I want to just kind of go through a few announcements, if I could. First of all, if you're looking at coming to the church, then by all means, we invite you to come out. We have a wonderful, wonderful time. The church is located at 2213 National Street in Henrico, Virginia. Okay. And so we start at 10:30. Doors typically open at 10:15. I always wondered why we say 10:15, because if you come at 10, we'll still let you in, but doors open at 10:15 to the sanctuary itself, and we typically get started at 10:30. Service will last usually about an hour and a half. We sing, we laugh, we joke, sometimes we cry, but what's important is we're doing it together through God's blessings. So we would be delighted if you came out and joined us. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things that are happening at the church. In many cases, too much for me to begin to talk about. So say, for instance, we have Tune Up Tuesday. And that's where you come in, we dissect the Word of God. It's in an open forum. We're able to talk, ask questions, and really get in and try to get a true understanding of God's Word. We have ARC Financial. Pastor Joel does a wonderful job of helping us to actually manage our money. This is something absolutely revolutionary. When I was a child or when I was younger, we didn't have these kind of things, not in church. If you wanted to get financial help, you had to pay somebody big money. But Pastor Joe actually brings this service to us as members of the church free of charge. He shows you what to do. He gives you the biblical rationale for why you should be doing it. And by the time you leave, you will have an understanding of the urgency of why you need to take some financial action. So I absolutely invite you to come out to that as well. Let's see. If you ever need to get in touch with the ReNew You team, just text the word renew to the number 804-925-1466. That's 804-925-1466. Now, something else that we have coming up huge is going to be for our Easter weekend on the 16th and the 17th. And as you can see on screen, we're going to have a wonderful time. We're going to have food. We're going to have music, games, 3-on-3 basketball. Come out. Join us, have some fun. We had a ball last year, and we're looking forward to having a ball again this year. So with that said, I want to get ready to go into our topics for the next 3 months. We're going to be talking about toxic relationships. Let me say it again. We're going to be talking about toxic relationships. And so what we're going to do is we're going to walk through and kind of break it down. This month, the month of April, we're going to talk about, what are we talking about here? How to recognize toxic relationships. And I'll mention that in just a second. We'll also look at the things that we can do to keep ourselves safe inside of toxic relationships. That includes, do I stay? Do I go? What do I do? We'll try to give you some tips and things on how to handle that. And we'll finish out the quarter in June by actually talking about what healthy relationships look like. Let's go to that next slide. I usually like to start here because in my case, I will jump ahead if if somebody doesn't stop me. So when we look at that first slide, the foundation for renew you, okay, and that comes out of Romans 12:2. Here's what it says: and be not conformed to this world, the pattern of this world, the things you see of this world, the all of the things that have to do with what you see in this world. And it says, but be ye transformed. In other words, you can be renewed. Okay. And he gives us the method in which we can do that. Be ye transformed by the renewing of what? Your mind. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends, family members, it all starts here. It all starts here. It starts with what it is you think, and it goes from there. So be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. This is the method for transforming ourselves. Okay, let's go to that next slide. So what we talked about, which I already covered already, are the upcoming topics that we're going to get into. April, how to identify toxic relationships. May, how to keep yourself safe in or from toxic relationships, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. And we'll end the whole thing in June with healthy relationships. So I'm already excited about what we're going to be doing. Okay, so let's jump in. Okay, let's go to that next slide. How to identify toxic relationships. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some of the characteristics, okay, of what makes a toxic relationship toxic. So one of the first things that occurred to me was, why do we use the word toxic? That next slide is going to kind of break it down for us. So, say for instance, okay, the word toxic, if you look it up with the Oxford Dictionary, means, okay, poisonous. Anything that is poisonous. Um, it's a wonderful day outside. If I get a minute, I got to go out and do some yard work, right? And so part of the yard work I'll be doing is I got to make sure I kill those weeds. Okay. Well, guess what? I use a poison on the weed so that the weed dies. Okay. Similar to that weed, and there's a lot of parallels between weeds and toxic people. Okay. But similar to the weeds, okay, toxic people, okay, can be poisonous to us, okay? WebMD actually describes it this way. It says a toxic person is anyone whose behavior adds negativity and upset to your life. For those of you who follow Urban Dictionary, here's what it says. I laughed when I saw this. It's not funny, but I appreciated the spin that they put on it. Toxic is when they, the other person, can't let you go, but check it out, but won't treat you right either. I think that's powerful. So that's why we call it toxic. Now, from there, scripturally, okay, Titus 3:10 says it this way. It says, as for a person who stirs up division after warning him once and then twice, Titus says, have nothing more to do with that person. Okay? Nothing more to do with that person. Here's what Proverbs says. Proverbs says, make no friend with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man. In other words, it's warning us ahead of time that if you see somebody that is given over to these types of behaviors, in most situations, it simply does not end well for you. Okay. Understand, and we're going to talk a little more about this. They are going to do what they do. Okay. The question is going to be, what are you going to do? Okay. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says it this way: do not be deceived. I love this. Bad company ruins good morals. Remember when we talked about the poison? And we'll talk about this as well. They have the ability to change you. Let me say it again. They have the ability to change you. Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals. We're as good as the people we keep company with. And then lastly, Proverbs also says, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. In other words, just like the fool will suffer harm, you will suffer harm because you chose to be with the fool. Interesting stuff, right? Let's go to that next one. And so before we get started, you can go ahead and go to the next one after that. So before we jump into romantic, professional, family, and social relationships, I want to sneak in a little bit about this word that everybody throws around. You'll recognize it: narcissistic. Okay. The reason why I say everybody throws it around is because technically everybody has a little narcissism in them. We need that for our own personal protection. Okay. That's my method of trying to figure out if I'm in a toxic relationship. I have to see and tend to me. So everyone should have a certain degree of narcissism in them. Now, where narcissistic people come into play, okay, theirs typically is above and beyond. Let me give you an example, okay? So in mental health, we take our direction and we do our diagnosis using the DSM, Diagnostico Statistical Manual. And we use all of the information in there to figure out, what type of issues people may be dealing with. Here's what it says about narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissistic personality disorder is classified as a type of personality disorder wherein the sufferer has somewhat inflated sense of self-importance, a dire need for excessive attention, a lack of empathy, and a history of troubled relationships. It says a little more, but I want that to sink in for a second. They typically have a history of troubled relationship. Let me go on. This grand self image that they create of themselves in their mind allows them to avoid dealing with their own psychological insecurities. But creating and maintaining this illusion of grandeur results in dysfunctional behavior. So, one of the things we want to understand about someone who is, in fact, a narcissist, okay, is that in many cases, in most cases, they have a very, very frail and fragile ego. To combat that, they use this huge presentation of grandeur. But inside is a very, very frail ego, which is why the narcissist, which is interesting, needs you. They need you because you give them attention. They crave attention. That's why they need you. Gail Myers says something interesting. I like that as well. She says a narcissist's weapon of choice is often verbal through slander, lies, playing the victim. Okay. Um, in flip tales of who was the victim and who was the abuser, gossip, rage, verbal abuse, and intentional infliction of emotional pain. It is a systemic dismantling of another person's relationship, reputation, emotional, physical, spiritual health, life, and very soul. This is why narcissists are so often called emotional vampires. So when we talk about toxic relationships, it's going to be interesting because in some cases, some of the characteristics that we're going to look at may not necessarily mean that this person is a narcissist. In other words, you may recognize some of these traits in you. You may recognize some of these traits in some of the people that you're in relationship, rather it is romantic, professional, family, social, or what have you. Okay, let's go to that next slide. So before we jump in, I want you to keep this in mind. Okay, the narcissist has, if we were to boil it down, they have a need for attention. That's why they need you. Okay, so people in toxic relationships, okay, what you'll notice is they need attention. Okay, they also have a need for superiority. The narcissistic person has to be in charge. They don't want to be somewhere where they're not in charge and running things. Why? Because they want the recognition. Okay, they have this exaggerated sense of importance. Okay, as a matter of fact, we could probably go on to simply say that it is entitlement, a sense of entitlement. They have a whole bunch of other things as well. Black and white thinking, okay? And that black and white thinking, in other words, it's either right or it's wrong, okay? It's either up, it's down, um, leads them to often be perfectionistic. And who are they being perfectionistic towards? You. They're being perfectionistic towards you. You'll also know that you'll also notice that they tend to be very moody. They're moody because when they can't get their way, it throws them into a depression of sorts. Okay. Again, this is why they need you. You'll find that they're very controlling, needs to control every aspect of what's going on. And we'll talk about it a little bit more. Okay. We already talked about the fact that they're arrogant. Okay. But the biggest thing that I think is very important in this case is the lack of empathy. The lack of empathy. And what makes it incredibly interesting about the narcissist is that, ladies and men, when you first meet them, they seem to be the nicest people. They're complimenting you on everything you do. They're encouraging you about your career, and they're just really giving you a self esteem boost. All so they can use it against you in just a few short months. And that's what makes it so deceptive. I think about the fact that in Genesis, God described Satan in this manner. He said that uh, Satan was. I'm trying to remember what version it was, but he says that Satan is the most subtle creature that I've created. Subtle. In other words, it's happening, and you don't realize it's happening. That's what happens in addiction, substance abuse, gambling, pornography, all of these different things. It's subtle. It's so subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It does not say, hey, just so you know, I'm working on giving you a mental issue, a mental disorder. It's just in the background, growing and growing and growing. So yeah, lack of empathy, okay, which is actually huge. So let's go to that next slide, and actually more like the first two slides, because I want to look at it from a romantic standpoint. So romantically speaking, okay, when we think about toxic relationships, the slide after that, when we think about toxic relationships, thank you, um, there's a whole bunch of different things that go with that, okay? So if there's the presence of any type of physical or verbal abuse, what you have to remember about the person that is toxic is they have a low image of themselves that they don't want to face. And so the only thing they can do with that is begin to project it, as we call it, onto you. Okay. So if you are receiving physical or verbal abuse, yeah, it's toxic. Okay. We talked about the fact that, yeah, they're very controlling. What do they want to control? Everything. They want to control when you take the car. They want to control what time you come home, what time you leave, who you're talking to, um, the time you spend on Facebook. They want to control your Facebook. They want access to it. They want access to your email. They want access to everything so they can control it. You'll notice that they don't like the word no. If they ask for something and you say, I can't, it's a problem with them. And it usually turns into a very big deal. They can't handle no. What's interesting is they don't take ownership for anything. Everything that happens is always someone else's fault, even within the relationship. Look what you did. Look what you did. Look what you did. So, some things that you need to consider is if you're starting to feel bad in their presence, there might be a problem. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells in their presence, there might be a problem. If in order for them to feel good, they have to make you feel bad, there might be a problem. They're constantly violating boundaries, constantly. Privacy, you name it, physically. Um, they have a tendency to want to keep score of everything you do. Why? Because they're going to bring it back in a method to control or put you down. So they keep score of everything. Remember that time last year when we were at the family picnic and you said, and in your mind, you're going, that was last year. They keep score because they're going to use it. Okay. If you've noticed that you yourself have begun to stop communicating with them because it does no good to talk to them. What's interesting is I'll go back to narcissism for a second. I can't even say it. But one of the things that we learn about narcissistic personalities, that's good H2O, is that these people almost never seek treatment. Never. Why? Because they don't think they're wrong. They don't think that there's anything wrong with them. And so they don't seek treatment. And even when they seek treatment, usually from being forced, it's not successful. On top of that, narcissistic people tend not to change. They simply won't change. The average person let's face it, if you're looking at this broadcast, is because, hey, I want to learn something. I want to do something different. I want to change. Those who need it most are not watching, okay? Because they don't think they've done anything wrong. And so, yeah, they typically don't change. As a matter of fact, this may be the thought that's going around in your mind, is that you're waiting for them to change. They won't. They will not. The only change that will come will be the change in you. That's it. Okay. Their last relationship was just like this, where they preyed upon someone and they got someone they knew they could manipulate. They got someone that they knew they could control. They got someone that fed into all of, their issues. When you decide the relationship is over, the next person they are in a relationship with will be the exact same. They will not change. The only person that can and must change is you. Um, when you meet these type of people, typically they are very quick to want to enter into a relationship with you, very fast. I remember telling my daughters, when they began dating and began seeing people, was that, as they'd say, well, yeah, he says he wants to do this, he wants to get married, and I no, he's playing his best card too soon. There's no way. And sure enough, this is the sign of someone who is toxic. They want to hurry up and get you into a relationship. And so the way to hurry up and get you into a relationship is tell you, oh, baby, you so fine, you so beautiful, you so good at your job, you real good at this, you're real good at that, and you're fabulous, you're this, blah, 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 and try to give you an ego boost. But it's all for a reason, so that later they can tear it down. If they're moving too fast to get into a relationship with you, pay attention. I remember the first time my wife called me. I'm super sensitive. I admit it. I remember the first time my wife, way back when we met. You got to picture the 21-year-old version of me, and she called me. Hey, babe, would you? And it didn't sit well with me, because that's a term of endearment, and I didn't think we had got to that stage yet. So flags are going up. And when they use terms of endearment, baby, sweetheart, and you just met them, red flag. Trust me, if you're wrong, the red flag will go down. It's not like the red flag stays. It just says pay attention. That's all. Jealousy. Excessively jealous of everything. They're jealous of your friends. They're jealous of people on your job. They're jealous of family members. And ultimately, they use this as a mechanism to isolate you. Think about it from a hunting standpoint. That's what the hunter wants, is to isolate the prey from the flock, from the group, from the tribe. We could go all the way back to Africa. That was the means in which we were captured as slaves, when we ventured away from the tribe. And so they have that hunter mentality, to where they're going to tell you all kinds of things to get you to isolate yourself from your support. Hey, your mother doesn't like me. Your family doesn't like me. They don't understand me. They're jealous of our love. Your girlfriends, they only want us to break up. We need our support. We need it. And what that means is you have to put away this mentality that I don't need anybody. That's absolutely not true. We need our support. We need a girlfriend who's going to tell us, hey, I don't think he's right. The narcissist knows this, the toxic person knows this, and so they seek to cut you off as quickly as possible. I've had it happen. I've had buddies of mine say, hey, man, she's no good. We need that. We need that. And so let's go to the next slide. I want to get into something else. But here, those were some things that we were looking at from a romantic standpoint. Now, what's interesting is now you're going to start to notice, well, hey, Paul, I'm noticing that they're all kind of sort of the same. Yeah, they are. If we could go to that next slide. So, when we talk about professional relationships, rather you are in business or rather you are an employee at a company, you can typically tell if you're working in a toxic environment if you begin to notice these types of things. If you're constantly worried about being fired. Now, this doesn't count if you're sleeping on the job and you're not doing what you're supposed to do as a good employee. This doesn't apply. Okay, you're going to get what you got coming. The law of sowing and reaping is going to catch you. Okay, but if you're in an environment where there's just this feeling in the air that, man, I could lose my job at any moment, yeah, that's a sign there's some toxicity there. Okay, constant control and monitoring. We've seen that before. As a matter of fact, now you start to see what happens when the narcissist, I got to make sure I say it right, when the narcissist gets placed in control. Because people see these narcissistic characteristics, these traits, and often elevate these people because they don't know, they don't understand. They look like very capable people. They sound like they know what they're talking about. Constant control, constant monitoring. Okay. If you're finding that you're leaving your job, you're doing more sick days from stress at your job, there might be a problem. If you're being micromanaged, okay. If you're noticing things like blatant favoritism, cronyism, I think it's called in some other areas. Yeah, it's toxic. If unrealistic demands are being put on you, more than you can accomplish in an 8-hour day or however long your day is. If the employees around you, if none of them trust each other, it's a backstabbing environment. It's toxic. If the other employees have mentally checked out, you're looking around and you're going, wow, everybody around this place has checked out. There might be a problem. If your boss, your supervisor, is verbally abusive, if they have bullying like tactics, it might be toxic. If you leave work angry on a regular basis, remember, okay, they have the potential to change you. And so if you stay at this job, you will become one of them purely out of negativity. If you know the pay isn't, everybody's getting different pay and it's not based on any form of equality. Yeah, okay. If they use intimidation factors, or you see your boss working less than the employees. I used to work at this one place long time ago. It drove me nuts. This one, our supervisor sat there all day and did nothing except get up and complain at us. If you've begun to drink, smoke, do any kind of drugs, which includes pharmaceutical, gamble, any of these things because of the stress on your job, it probably isn't right for you. It probably isn't right. If you notice that there is a lot of turnover, in other words, employees come and they leave, they come and they leave, they come and they leave, but you're still there, it's not because you're a good employee. You're ignoring the signs. Rapid turnover. You constantly worry about retribution. As a matter of fact, and I'm just old enough to have seen a lot of it. Excessive silence. Oh my gosh. The whole place is quiet now. How come nobody talks around here? They don't like it when you talk. Okay. If there's a fear of telling the higher ups, hey, listen, we got a problem here. This isn't right. There's probably a problem. If you have a fear or hesitance of going against what they think, you've probably got a problem there if your input isn't valued. So all of these things add up to, yeah, in the workplace, I might be at the wrong place. And we need to look at that, because if we're staying, just like the person that is staying in a romantic relationship, if I'm staying in a professional relationship, despite seeing all of these signs, there might be something going on with you. There might be something going on with you where you attach yourself to unhealthy people and you're not recognizing it. So it's important to take these warning signs, and don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Don't be afraid to get on the web and find a therapist so you can begin to talk through these issues. I watched documentary after documentary after documentary of people who are essentially conned or brought into these toxic environments and taken complete advantage of. It's horrible. Let's go to that next slide. Let's see what we got next here. So we've been talking about professional relationships. So let's talk about the family. Now, the family is a little bit different, okay? It's not much different, but it is a little bit different. So with the family, there's I want you to think about it from two different sides. With the family, I want you to think about how you grew up first. Go to that next slide. So when you think about the environment that you grew up in with your family, okay, some things you want to think about is, was there some favoritism? Did mom favor my brother, my sister over me? A lot of the things are the same. Were there poor boundaries? I've met mothers and fathers who told their children about each other, and they don't realize the damage they did to the kids by doing that. Poor boundaries. It's just the opposite as well, meaning that if you're not establishing, if your mother and father aren't establishing a clear boundary between who is the parent and who is the child. In other words, your child thinks that you're their best friend. We call that undifferentiated self. In other words, the child doesn't recognize where the parent stops and they begin. If the parent likes it, the child likes it. If the parent hates it, the child hates it. There comes a time when the child has to begin to differentiate themselves. It's part of the development process. We call it adolescence. If you remember having unrealistic demands put on you, there was very little trust within your family, or maybe it was a chaotic environment. It was toxic. If it was hostile, if you watched violence in your home, if you watched your mother and father fight or whoever, yeah, it had an effect on you. It was toxic. If you began using drugs, just like in the romantic, just like in the professional, okay? If you begin using any type of drugs as a result of being in that environment, then yeah, it was probably toxic. This is not me talking about your upbringing, but this is me talking about getting real with what happened to you so you can take action to correct some things. Poor parenting, poor communication. In other words, I talk to people on a regular basis that will tell me that, well, we didn't talk about those kind of things in my house. Back in the day, children were meant to be seen and not heard. And as a result, they became adults who were afraid to express themselves. In some cases, adults who expose themselves to other harmful people, to other abusive people. If you had a parent, one or two, who were in jail, who spent time in jail, then yeah, you probably had a toxic environment. If there was excessive silence, especially if mom or dad and or mom used any type of drugs or drank alcohol or any of those things, it created a silence in the house because as children, we were trying to figure out what our next move is. I don't know what I'm going to be dealing with when mom comes in. I'm not going to know what I'm dealing with when dad comes in. Sometimes he comes in and he's a tyrant. Sometimes he comes in and he's so nice that I don't know what to think. And so as a child, I'm on edge because I'm waiting to see what I'm dealing with because that's going to decide what course of action I take as a child. As a result, I grow up with a very high anxiety. I can't relax. If you were made to feel guilty all the time, if you were made to feel ashamed all of the time, it was probably a toxic environment. Now, keep in mind, I'm not talking about, a child has to be corrected. They have to be given boundaries. There's a balance. I'm talking about if they went too far. If you had a fear of telling your parents how you felt, okay, there was probably a problem. Let's go to that next slide. So now what we're going to talk about is as an adult dealing with, okay, families, okay. Now you got the same thing going on, okay. You'll notice that there's this term called gaslighting. What does gaslighting mean? Gaslighting means when someone, usually a very toxic person, it could happen in a romantic relationship, but it could also happen at work. It could also happen with your friends. Gaslighting is when they make you feel as if you're the one with a problem, as if you actually have some type of mental issues. The problem with that is if you stay long enough, you begin to believe it. You begin to believe it. So even in adult families, okay, yeah, there's favoritism. There's this unspoken favoritism that may have existed since childhood. There's poor boundaries. Ma, dad, listen, I'm married. I got kids now. You guys can't just bust into my house at any time and decide you want to talk. There's these snide remarks. If there's very little trust within the family, if there's this passive aggressiveness where we don't come right out and say, hey, listen, that's not right. Or you hurt me when you said that. But instead, they find alternate methods to get back at you. If there is bullying and verbal abuse, yeah, it's happening right inside your family as an adult. Cliques and gossips. I didn't get into that in the professional realm, but yeah, it happens in the professional realm and it happens in your family. Gossip in the family. Psst, 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 psst. Psst, 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 psst. Toxic. Meanwhile, with all this childish behavior, there's no real communication. We're too busy being childish. If there's a lot of substance use in the family, it probably came from some issues that came right out of childhood. If you got a fear of speaking against the family, because they have cliques in the family too. Yeah, your family's probably toxic. So let's go to that next one. We're going to be finishing up here soon. The last one is social. Okay. And so in social circles, there's some slight differences, but for the most part, what you're going to find is that toxicity is absolutely the same. Okay. Have you ever had a friend that disregards your boundaries? The first question you have to ask yourself is, am I setting boundaries? Okay. Do you have a friend that always needs something from you? But if you are in need, they can't help you. Do you have a friend that rarely takes accountability for what they do? Do you have a friend that weaponizes their struggle and uses it against you? Makes you feel guilty about what they're going through? Do you have a friend that is openly has, guilt? I shouldn't say guilt. Makes you feel guilty about spending time with other friends. This doesn't happen all the time, but shouldn't friends of a friend also be a friend? Think about it. Shouldn't the friend of my friend also be my friend? That's not possible. They're hurtful. They make these little remarks about you, especially when you don't do what it is that they wanted you to do. They are also attention seeking. Where did we see that before? Okay. Narcissism. They want all the attention to be on them. Every place you go, every restaurant you go to, every activity you guys go to, the focus has to be on them. You'll notice that they tease and insult you, and they'll use it as a joke. I was just playing. No, you weren't. No, you weren't. And yeah, gaslighting. It happens with friends all the time. Okay. Do you have a friend that needs excessive praise? You got to always tell them how good they look. Girl, you look good. Man, yeah, you doing good. You got this, you got this. If they play the victim all the time, bad stuff happens to all of us, but they are constantly in crisis all the time. Today, you're going to get a phone call. I got a situation. Peer pressure. You trying to get some personal me time, and they're putting excessive pressure on you to do what they want. In fact, it turns into a form of bullying, intimidation. Okay. They have difficulty handling the truth. You go to tell them the truth about a situation, and they can't handle it. So they make you feel guilty, especially if you've been friends over a number of years. You'll notice that they have not grown a little bit. They're doing the exact same thing they were doing when you met them. They're being childish, especially if you cover for them. Oh no, he's not a bad person. He just, he's going through some stuff. She's not bad, she just had a couple of things happen to her. You're covering for them. They're making you feel obligated to the friendship. Meanwhile, they're gossiping. Something else to watch for is unpredictable behavior. Again, we saw this when we talked about narcissism. Unpredictable behavior, because if they can't be the center of attention, if they can't control every scenario, if they can't have their way, if they can't put you down so they can put themselves up, that puts them in a depressive state. And you'll notice they rarely apologize, if at all, about anything that they do. Let's go to that next slide. I think we're at the end here. And so I want to remind you about what God's word says about all of these things. Remember in Titus 3:10, write this down. As for a person who stirs up division after warning him once, then twice, have nothing to do with them. Save yourself. Save yourself. Proverbs 22:24. Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man. Save yourself. Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals. If you stay, you're going to get dragged under. Save yourself. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harms. Proverbs 13:20. Save yourself. Here's the challenge. Between now and our next session in May, where I'm going to talk about what you can do to keep yourself safe, I want you to examine your relationships, all of them. Examine what's happening at the job, the atmosphere you're in, the environment you're in. Now, what you may find is that you need to make some changes. Don't run from that. Do not run from that. But examine those relationships. If you see the toxic things happening that we talked about at work, you might need to make a change. if you're noticing the things we talked about in a romantic relationship, you might need to make a change. With family, and families handle a little bit different because you can't pick family, but you can put some distance between them. You might need to make a change. You might need to figure out that you need new friends. It has been my great pleasure to be before you. Okay. I hope, I pray that you take these things serious. And let me at least, I wish I had a way of putting it up on the screen, but if you are in trouble right now to the point where you are not safe, get yourself to safety. There's a national abuse hotline. It's 800 799 7233. If you got more questions for me, feel free to text the word renew to the telephone number 804 925 1466. And I will get back with you. My promise. Until I see you the next time, take care of yourself. If I were in the sanctuary and brother Pastor Joe and Pastor Julius were there, they'd go, peace. I'm just going to say, till next time. Bye.